Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'll be showing you how to use a drone flight controller to fly a fixed wing RC airplane. And what is special about this build is that I'll show you how to use servos on a drone flight controller without mutilating your servo wires. So let's get into it. This build features the Kakute F722. And what you will need are some pin headers, whether they be 90-degree pin headers or straight pin headers. You're going to need a soldering iron and solder. You're also going to need JST pigtails. So let's get into the build. Before you do anything, unbox your flight controller and plug it up to the computer. You're going to flash the latest version of iNav or ArduPilot or Betaflight or whatever software you're going to be using on your flight controller, but ensure you do that now. After you flash, well, on my build, the latest version was iNav 8.0.1 Gallant Goosehawk. Works fine. While you're plugged up to the board, you could sort out your UARTs, sort out where you want where the receiver is gonna be plugged up, where your VTX is, and where your GPS is. You can configure everything, do your calibration, and most importantly at this step, do your mixer. Ensure you know what your software has assigned for your throttle control and your two servo controls. If you're using a wing, if you're using a airplane with a tail, why are you using a drone flight controller anyways? But make sure you do the mixer so you can see what output the software is assigning to your particular flight control services. In the mixer, what this thing assigned servo 5 and 6 as the wings, as the elevons. Man, that word was tough to say. So servo 5 and 6, output 5 and 6 corresponds to motor 5 and 6. So motor 1 is the throttle, and I could not get motor M2 and M3 to work as outputs because the mixer used 5 and 6. 5 and 6 are down here, so 5 and 6. Anyways, after you know where your left and right elevons are, let's take a look at the diagram real quick. So on the top right of the diagram, you see a potential plug, and the wires that come from this plug, you would solder them up to a little block you're going to make with your pin headers to connect your servos to the flight controller. So the red wire is battery power. You have to power the board separately. So if you have an ESC, you plug your battery up to the ESC. Your ESC is powered, but the board also needs power. That's why you need your JST pigtails. You'll connect VBAT and ground to your JST pigtails. My airplane that I put this project into, the ZOHD Dart, the Dart has a JST pigtail, a male JST pigtail. So I put a female JST pigtail on the board, and I can plug my XT30 battery up to the flight controller and get battery voltage out from the JST wire that comes from the flight controller to give power to the board. That was a mouthful. Alright, and we looked at the last 4 wires on the wiring diagram. Those are M1 to M4. In the mixer tab of iNav, you would have seen S1 assigned to throttle. That would correspond to motor 1. And in my case, M5 and 6, which are on the sides, correspond to my left and right elevon. So if I had looked at the mixer tab before I did all of this, I would have been fine. But now that I know, I'll tell you to skip the headache. So motor 1, you take a note of that wire, and you can probably twirl the other wires up together, or knot them, or remove them if you want to. I wouldn't. You keep the wire for the servo, and then you'll need some scrap wire for M5 and M6. Well, I needed scrap wire for M5 and M6. If I nav assigned your left and right elevons to M2 and M3, basically an output on this main big wire, this main big cable here, you're fine. Otherwise, let's do what I do. Now we're going to create our block. This is going to be our interface to connect our servos to our flight controllers. Here's what I came up with. I'm going to connect the top rows to the motor outputs on the Kakute flight controller. These are going to be kind of like our signal wires to our servos. So the signal wire will connect to these top rows, and each of the pins on the top row will connect to one of the outputs on the flight controller. The middle row will be the positive, and the bottom row will be the negative. I cut off the vertical pieces on these 90-degree bends to get my soldering iron in there, and I basically took that piece that I cut off, turned it sideways, and soldered it down to the pins, bridging the gap between all 3 pins. When you plug your ESC into one of these pins, all of the pins in the block will get 5-volt current from the ESC if you have bridged the gaps correctly. Please ensure that you don't bridge the gaps between the positive and the negatives, because you might get a short. Let's continue with the build. Actually, the build is finished. So let me zoom in. Yes, so first you mark where you want your ESC to go. I marked where my ESC is going with some whiteouts. This is on the block itself, and I also marked my ESC servo wire, so I know where it is. So this is where I put my ESC, and the ESC is giving 5 volts to the entire system. So this is where I marked my ESC, and I got some scrap wire, this pale blue wire and this purplish wire. Those go to M4 and M5. Is it M4 or M5 or M5 or M6? I think it's M5 and M6. I forget. Yeah, and these correspond to my left elevon and my right elevon. This is the JST plug that comes out from my ESC, and it plugs in to the JST plug for the flight controller, and this gives the board 5 volts power. The 5 volts power the camera and the GPS and the VTX. Oh, and the receiver. Yeah. Yeah, so once you finish those steps are the critical steps, then you're practically done. You just need to wire up your GPS, because apparently different GPSs have different pinouts. So wire up your GPS, you solder up your GPS, solder up your VTX if you have to solder it up, otherwise you... Oh yes, my VTX did have to be soldered up, so you solder that up, install it, and yeah, you're good to go. This plane has already flown. I have to fly it again to do the auto tune because it did not do that properly. I'll link the video to the maiden flight of this plane down in the description down below. So yeah, you're pretty much done. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section down below. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Enjoy. Bye.